Wake up, Detroit. I'm Joanne Watson, and this is your wake-up call.
When a brown girl child is born, the earth shifts. The sun is at half-mast. The moon waits for her first cry. The ancestors set the table. The flowers turn red as blood. This is your land, continent daughter, with tree trunk legs and branches for arms. This is your soil, black and fertile as your eyes facing an apartheid Jim Crow current past memory. Some of us begin the removal of shackles at birth. We grow into the armor of struggle quickly. We brew courage in our tea, blend bravery into our Sunday dinners. Joanne Watson, you understand nation building is not a part-time job. This dedicated life is sometimes lonely, a vulnerable choice, but it is the only way you know how to operate. You are wired for the movement in your black women bones, even when tired, still fighting, still organizing, still singing morning spirituals. You were born to lead, even in your own family, the eldest of 10 children born to Jefferson and Lestine. You made Damon, Nefertari, Stephen, Maya. Her children always knew she was larger than life. When you are a woman in the movement, you take the children with you on the journey. You bring the babies with you to your college classes. When you travel to Ghana for the first time, it will be with your daughters in tow. When you are a fearless, nationalist thinking mama, mothering never stops with your own babies. 30 godchildren and mentees across the globe. The daughter of a ministering mother is already ordained for good trouble. A seer, a prophetic young student preparing for her lifelong role as servant to her own community. When your purse was snatched in a Farmer Jack parking lot many years ago with your kids' tickets to Run DMC in the purse, you made sure they still got to that concert and even hosted Melly Mel and the Furious Five in your living room, because queens make it look easy. When you were a single mom, people would tell you what you can't do. Instead, you moved to New York City with all 4 of your C's to do your necessary work with the YWCA, because queens make it look easy. Ghana, Togo, South Africa, where is your heart, Mama Watson? Nurturing spirit, baking melt in your mouth, homemade biscuits. How many hours do you sleep, Warrior Watson, with endless work ethic and blue-collar blood racing through your veins? How do we say thank you for your work, your time, your heart? We know you will never really retire. There is a fire on the path to freedom. There is smoke. There is sacrifice. There are stories of justice, of women, of Tubman, Sojourner, of Angela, Asada, Coretta, and Merle, and Betty, and Queen Mother Moore. Some of us know we are ancient, that our marrow is laced with legacy, that we are here to bring life to our daughters. Sometimes it just takes one woman, a mother, a grandmother, a Spitfire, griot, a sister, the only woman to lead the NAACP's largest chapter. She, daughter of the movement, of Rosa, of Irma. She was a birth that gave birth to possibility for other young activists like me, a true D woman, frontline Fatima, Nigerian blood, councilwoman, leader, truth teller, Joanne Watson, social worker, president of the Anti-Clan Network, sister, inspiration, dedicated to the protection of girls and the voices of women wrapped in West African beauty, regal and resilient. Wake up, Detroit. Wake up, South Africa. Wake up, Cuba. Wake up, small business owners. Wake up, White House. Wake up, reparations. Wake up, teachers. Wake up, women. Wake up, schools. Sleeping is not an option when the Honorable Joanne Watson is in the room.
Wake up, Detroit. It's a wonderful day. This is the day the Lord has made. We rejoice and we're glad in it. We're rejoicing right now. This is the birthday of the one and only Malcolm X. Malcolm X celebrating his birthday. None other than May 19th. This is the birthday of our leader. And we want to bring forth 2 Malcolm X men for your pleasure and your delight this morning. You ought to have some Malcolm X men on Malcolm X's birthday. I want to introduce you to Paul Lee. You already know Paul Lee, historian, archivist, researcher, bad brother from Highland Park and Detroit. Paul Lee, welcome to Wake Up Detroit.
Thank you. Yeah.
Dr. Ray Johnson, activist, outstanding leader, businessman, educator, lecturer, godfather of the world, the great Dr. Ray Johnson. Thank you for being
a
Malcolm X man today.
Thank you so
as we
much,
celebrate Malcolm's birthday. One of the things I love about Malcolm X is that after all these years, he still inspires, does he not, Paulie? After all these, and you were not, although some may think you were around, you were not around. You're just a baby. You have picked up the mantle of study. He studied. He read. He taught. He was a serious African, and he seriously loved his people, and that love still touches us today, does it not? What does it mean to you today on Malcolm X's birthday, Dr. Ray Johnson? Just to be able to center on the spirit of this brother.
Well, you know, when I think about Brother Malcolm X, and there's so many things that he does, there's so many things he represents. I was out very late last night as we were discussing development and action plans, and I thought about this brother when I first read his book, and I remember back in the days, Ron Scott and I and stuff, and Larry Simmons. As a matter of fact, we had organized right there at Highland Park Community College and locked out the building doors back in the 60s to force them to have far more African-centered black history at that particular time, as we were talking, and also educators. And I thought about his spirit of activism.
Yes.
I thought about the fact that he was a servant leader.
Yes.
I thought about the fact that he was a soldier who understood and recognized that he was channeling the spirit of all of our ancestors as well as our God, and that his life was not just his own.
Come on.
I recognized that he was willing to give all he could so that we could be all that we can be. There are many things that, as I think about Malcolm, but those are some of the things that came to my mind, that sense of activism, that sense of servant leadership, that sense that he would plant trees under which he knew he may never sit, but he recognized those ancestors, and he began to certainly solidify his legacy.
My Lord. And Malcolm X himself was the essential catalyst, an igniting factor for so many others that we revere. You know, I just love Dr. Imari Abubakari and his brother, Dr. Gaidi Obadele. But when you understand that he was their hero, I mean, he was there. You didn't talk to Reverend Milton Henry, Gaidi Obadele, without him looking off into the sky and talking about Malcolm X. Tears would come to his eyes.
Yes.
He loved Malcolm X.
Yes.
So if you really understand the Republic of New Africa,
Yes.
which is among the most left organizations established by a people, at the epicenter of all that happened with the Republic of New Africa, founded in Detroit, was Malcolm X and his legacy. What about that, Paulie?
Did you know that the Republic of New Africa grew out of another organization?
Talk to us about it.
The Malcolm X Society.
That's right.
What did I say?
That Gaidi and Imari established after Malcolm.
What did I say? It's Malcolm X. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They loved Malcolm X. And it was not just political love. It was personal.
Malcolm's brother Wilfred, who you knew, his
Yes.
eldest brother, told me that Milton Henry was as close to Malcolm or closer than his own blood brothers.
That's true. That's true. And when that last trip to Detroit, as you've shown in a clip, when Malcolm arrived at the airport, what happened? Milton, it was a soft rain. Reverend Milton Henry took the jacket he was wearing on his own and put it over Malcolm's head to protect him from the rain. That's love. And put his arm around him and helped usher him in. Love, brotherhood, just straight up love. He was beloved in this community, and the Detroit ought to own Malcolm X like nobody else. And also, of course, Betty Shabazz.
Yes.
One of the reasons that I agreed to do the interview today, because I actually didn't want to do it. I can't really explain why, but my relationship with Malcolm X is oddly personal, even though I never met him. I was blessed to know his family, including his mother and his siblings.
Yes.
And to be trusted by his inner circle, his associates in the Nation of Islam.
Come on now.
And the two organizations that he founded after he broke with it, the Muslim Mosque Incorporated and the Organization of African American Unity.
Yes.
So for me, May 19th is not just the anniversary of his birth, but it also reminds me of the tragedy of his loss.
My Lord.
And for me, in some ways, and I hope I don't sound presumptuous, it's like the loss of a family member.
Amen. Amen.
Well, I think that is that's the impact that he had for all of us. as we begin to think about that, I recall many years ago up and down Linwood, and the opportunity I had to meet the man.
Come on now.
Shining the shoes in my dad's barber shop, right down from the mosque on 11611 Linwood and Burlingame and Webb. And listening to the conversations.
My Lord.
I think about the fact that, and I felt that I'm in that conversation, that substantive discourse took place, where all these thought leaders at that particular time, I didn't think about it as school or higher education or the depth of knowledge. I was just amazed and intrigued to listen to the conversations and his capacity to even look at a youngster in those days and pour knowledge in.
Come on now.
And so even though not having all the intimate knowledge, but you know, there is that sense of loss. There is that sense of loss because his life was so big and he empowered all whom he met.
Yes.
And that is truly the quality of all the masters, to be able to pour life into you, pour knowledge into you. And so on this day, I concur. It's the same feeling. It's celebratory, and yet at the same time, it is, I relive that sense of loss of that enlightened leader.
Doctor, what was the address of your father's?
11611.
11611. That was just a few doors from the headquarters of the Group on Advanced Leadership.
Come on now. Exactly right.
Imari Abubakari, otherwise known as Richard Henry, was the president of this black nationalist organization, and one of the leaders was his brother Milton, who we know as Gaidi.
Yes.
The reason that I agreed to do this interview today, Ms. Watson, is because you and I were both proteges of Milton Henry.
That's true.
Gaidi.
That's true.
And I didn't just want to honor Brother Malcolm, but also honor Gaidi.
That's right.
Yes.
Because he played a crucial role in the popular understanding of Malcolm X. He organized a company called the Afro-American Broadcasting and Recording Company.
Say so.
And it's that company that recorded, although most people don't know this, and few historians have credited it, Dr. King's historic speech at the
I
Walk to
have a
Freedom.
dream. That's right.
Down Woodward Avenue. There was a huge rally held at Cobo Arena on June 23rd, 1963. You remember this very well.
Yes.
And I actually have a photograph of Milton Henry, Gaidi, in front of Dr. King.
Yes.
With headphones on.
Yes.
Recording this.
Yes.
But he later recorded 3 of Malcolm's most historic speeches.
Yes.
The speech known as Message to the Grassroots, which was delivered at the Northern Negro Grassroots Leadership Conference
Yeah.
At King Solomon Baptist Church
Come on
on
now.
November 10th, 1963.
Yes.
The better historians now cite this as one of the birthplaces of black power.
Come on
the call
now.
for self-determination.
That's right.
He recorded Brother Malcolm's speech at King Solomon again on April 12th, 1964.
Yes.
Which Malcolm himself titled The Ballad of the Bullet.
Come on now.
And finally, a week before Malcolm was assassinated, on February 14th, 1965, he spoke at Ford Auditorium. That also was recorded. After Brother Malcolm was assassinated, Milton Henry Gaidi released the recordings on long-playing records,
Yes.
which became underground hits throughout
Yes.
Africa America.
Yes.
The transcripts of those speeches were later published, at least 2 of them, in Malcolm X Speaks, the first collection that was widely available. And that's how we understand Malcolm.
Do you know where
Those
he got the
speeches-
equipment from?
I'm sorry.
You know where he got the equipment from?
He told me that was his equipment. But what did
He
tell
borrowed
you?
the equipment from Barry Gordy.
I've heard that story.
Yeah, he told me that. So he borrowed it, and it was not anything done with an agreement or a memorandum of understanding. It was friendship.
Yeah, but you notice that Barry Gordy released Dr. King's Walk to Freedom speech on Motown, but didn't release any of Malcolm's. That was done independently. But those 3 speeches helped shape the rest of the 1960s.
That's exactly right.
Kwame Ture, who was popularly known as
Stokely
Stokely Carmichael,
Carmichael.
who is the greatest popularizer of the concept of black power,
So enough.
cites those speeches
That's right.
as the source of that
Organizing.
philosophy.
Absolutely.
And there were not only leaders grew out of those speeches, but
That's right.
organizations, including the
right.
Republic of New Africa.
Come on
The
now.
Republic of New Africa is largely an outgrowth of one speech, Message to the Grassroots. National Black United Political Party, the National Black United Front, and others largely grew out of the Ballad of the Bullet
That's
speech.
it.
Right.
That's it.
All African People's Revolutionary Party, Congress of African People, African Liberation Support Committee, and Pan-African Congress USA largely grew out of the last message.
Come on now.
And we owe all of that to Milton Henry Gaidi.
That's right.
Who was selfless, who was
Certainly.
other-centered. He was the most spiritually, divinely inspired man I've ever known. He was, when he talked about reparations, he wrapped it up in Numbers 5:5. It says in the Word, he'd say, in the Word, that if somebody has done a wrong to you, has stolen from you, then they must give it back,
Exactly.
plus a fifth thereof.
Plus a fifth. There you go.
That's the
right.
Lord.
That's right.
You know, when he was a militant civil rights attorney, they called him the Black Defender
Come on now.
That's right.
because he
That's right.
tended to represent those who nobody else would represent.
Listen, when I was
Exactly.
sitting on city council, that was Gaidi, Reverend Milton Henry, saw me into office. I knew who he was.
Gaidi
So-
swore you in?
Yes.
What an honor.
That's amazing.
He came into a city council meeting unexpectedly once with a hot dog vendor who had been ticketed by some Detroit police unwrongfully. And he came in with that and got himself, he was quite the elder by then. And I didn't recognize the sister, but I certainly recognized him. So when somebody in the back of the room starts saying, well, no, they're on another agenda, I said, excuse me, we're on his agenda right now. And he came to the table. The lady didn't even have enough money to pay him for it. It's Milton Henry. Y'all need to take care of that police officer who keeps giving her tickets and let her sell some hot dogs in downtown Detroit. Will you do that, please? Thank you very much.
I find it,
This was just a few years before he joined the Ancestors.
I find
Right,
it ironic
right.
that you'd say this took place at the city council. The late Grace Lee Boggs told me a
Grace Lee
story
Boggs.
that there was a protest that was scheduled in front of the city county building, but the authorities had planned to lock them out. So Milton Henry Gaidi got in the night before and snuck out on an upper floor to be able to drop a bag. And then you tell me he later was inside the building at a council meeting.
Well, that was the power of that man. And, it's always interesting, just as you indicated, and I'm so glad, too, in terms of this discussion, certainly includes him because it's difficult. And not to include him, and a lot of folks really don't know that relationship.
That's true.
And that is the power of history. That's the power of your brilliance to continue to share the legacy. But I recall that and you were talking about how spiritually aligned he was with all the issues.
Yes.
He saw that as in a holistic way and could apply everything that we were doing, from that particular call, from that particular perspective, that none of this was separate. It was not
That's right.
this or that or that political. It all
That was
was
him.
and
He
was
tried
able-
to tell that to the Presbyterian Church before they asked him to leave. Help me, Holy Ghost.
He left the Presbyterian
No,
Church?
they invited him out of the doctrine because he was teaching the barrier-breaking love and practices of Jesus the Christ, who was a
Exactly.
revolutionary.
You know,
So what he did was start his own church.
Yeah.
something similar happened to another one-time Presbyterian minister. He was known at the time as Reverend Albert B. Clay.
Uh-huh.
We know him now.
That's
Jeramogi,
right.
I baby, I
That's
gave
right.
man.
Yep.
He was at a Presbyterian church and then had to end up forming his own because of doctrinal differences.
And he said, I'm not mad at them.
Right.
They do what they do. I have to do what I have to do. Just sweet.
It's interesting. All the people that we've talked about, Jeramogi, Gaidi, Imari, and Malcolm X, are all proponents of black self-determination.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
How ironic in Detroit and
That's
Michigan
right.
today.
And look at the progeny, Chokwe Lumumba, who scored higher on the test, the law school admission test, than anybody before or since I've heard. Had himself at the front of the walkout of the black law students at Wayne State University, even though he was not one of the blacks being threatened with expulsion.
Exactly.
He put himself at risk, which is what he did, because he was mentored
There you go.
directly by Reverend Milton Henry, by Dr. Imari. As a matter of fact, when he, God rest his soul, as he was driving through Mississippi when he became ill, he had left. We were in constant communication. In fact, he acted like I worked for him. Dr. Mario. I was working for Congressman John Conyers on reparations.
I had the same feeling.
Raise
Congressman
a problem.
Conyers, once you work for him, you always work
Oh,
for
come
him.
on, somebody.
you know it.
But I was working for Conyers, and Dr. Imari Obadele called me and said, "Now I'm filing another lawsuit against the U.S. and I need you to just proofread it, darling, and do that, and then let me know if it's all right." I said, I'm in a government office. Dr. Imari Obadele on the government. That's all right, baby. That's all right. That's all right. Now I need you to type me a chapter about the 7 women who are greatest in reparations history, and I need it in 3 hours. I said, I'm in the congressman. That's okay, baby. Just go ahead and do it. He was completely centered on the liberation of our people, but he was on his way to see to Jackson to see Chokwe.
Oh.
He was on his way to see Chokwe, and then some hours passed and they couldn't find him. He was in Mississippi. Yeah, but just the fact that he was still on the journey. Still on the journey.
Reverend Watson, is this broadcast made available on YouTube or any other platform for future reference?
It should be.
The reason I say it should be, as I mentioned, everybody we spoke about were proponents of self-determination, of black power. And here we're living in a state right now, in a city
My Lord.
that has experienced a white, racist, right-wing takeover.
It's
This
a
is not
disgrace before
gentrification,
God.
It's recolonization.
That's exactly what it is.
And
The
what would-
re-enslavement of Africans.
What would these visionaries have had to say
My Lord.
about what's happening right
Well,
now?
they left enough people around who knew their story. So they would expect you to fight, not go along, get along, stand up and fight for the liberation of your people, your children, yet born, and your ancestors who paid such a heavy price.
Another reason I agreed to come on this program is I wanted to thank you. You and Kwame Kenyatta and precious few others on the Detroit City Council fought this illegal takeover.
Illegal.
And I trust that historians, or at least one historian in the future, will make it clear that this was at best semi or quasi-legal. And it was certainly unethical and immoral.
No
But on the city council, you fought against this. And why I pray that you will be honored for the stand that you took, I also pray that those who sold us out
My Lord.
will be condemned
My
by
Lord.
future generations, that their names will be associated with Benedict Arnold
My Lord.
and Judas and Brutus and other traitors, because they sold out the collective interests of our people for their own narrow, selfish interests.
No question.
And in my opinion, they should not be forgiven
My Lord.
by
my
God
Lord.
or our future progeny.
Well,
Well, one of the things that to speak to the greatness of this queen that sits here, who comes from the legacy of all the African queens that birthed civilization to the world, part of that legacy is every name you mention, in some way, there's that association with Joanne Watson. That you can't go anywhere and talk about liberation and talk about self-determination without her name coming up and her spirit coming up. And right along with those ancestors who've gone on and what they would think about what has happened, the joy that I also have is that they will think about what you are doing.
That's right.
And how you are carrying the legacy.
That's
and
right.
how this queen, through the lineage from Queen Nzinga to on down, this sister is doing those things. But you're absolutely right. That it was in my estimation, certainly we know it was immoral what has happened. And we recognize too in this right wing takeover, all basic so-called principles of democratic practices were completely, even when the people voted against.
that's right. The people in the state of Michigan,
State
not
of
just
Michigan,
Detroit,
exactly.
voted to repeal the emergency man, which is
Exactly.
unconstitutional, anti-voting rights on its face.
Yep.
There's a
Yes.
low life, a low down governor who poisoned folks in Flint, who's been poisoning the constitutional rights
Exactly.
of
There you
people
go.
in this state ever since he's been in office. Set out to put the same law right back into force, which is illegal. Now, the state constitution, for those who happen to be legally based, says you cannot put a law back in force that has been repealed by the state of Michigan, which I sent a little something to the Justice Department and said, how long? How long will you all let illegal, unconstitutional activity just have its way in Michigan?
Yes.
You sent that to President Barack Obama's Justice Department?
I sent it to President Barack Obama's Justice Department, yes,
You
and
get any
they
response?
no response, which is a response.
Yeah.
Then they made the mistake of inviting me to a Black History program at the White House.
Uh-oh.
In the course of all that has been going on, I was a guest of our congressman, and I was nice. I was sweet, but I had something in my hand, which was a write-up of all the unconstitutional anti-voting rights, all the illegal business that's been going on here. And I saw the bankruptcy before it came, and I knew because they chose a bankruptcy attorney to be the emergency manager, so nothing, it was all a conspiracy.
Judge Rhodes.
Yeah, who is now working for the same governor and went to work for the emergency manager in Puerto Rico on their bankruptcy right after he stepped down from the bench. The people need to do their homework and do some research on everything. If you just study, it will reveal, everything will be revealed. But I gave them something in hand. I didn't want to send it by email, or I gave it in hand, and that this is what's happening in Detroit. So I don't want anybody to ever say they didn't get it. It's like I gave him the president, the Marshall Plan, to rebuild Detroit.
Right.
So I didn't send it I gave it to him.
Right.
Then, when they invite me to these kind of meetings, I never get invited twice, but when I get invited, I use the opportunity to share information because sometimes you just have one time. So that's what you do.
You know, there's some scholars that say that black nationalism has run its course, but I think these times are teaching us that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was right in his injunction, do for self.
Do for self. Do for
Marcus
self.
Garvey said your only ultimate security is that which you provide for yourself.
That's why we have some Malcolm X men in the house today. Paul Lee, you understand it, you speak it, you teach it, you've researched it, you've written about it, you've shared it, and you're a serious African. You're a Malcolm X man. Praise be to God. Into your bones. A man you never met, but you have you have picked up the nuances of his spirit, and you share it, and you own it. You have been connected with the legacy of our brother in a special way, and it shows. So we thank you today for being a Malcolm X man. We thank you, Ray Johnson, who has been teaching and preaching and mentoring young people and old people.
Thank you.
People like Jeff Edison,
yeah,
who was a leader in his own. Went to school with Chokwe.
Yes, I mean,
but you mentored young and so many others.
Thank you.
But you a Malcolm X man, selfless, other-centered, love the baby. It's all about the babies. That's what Malcolm said.
That's it.
If it ain't about the babies, then what is it all about?
That's right.
Praise God for it. And you're still working to try to lift up the African development, African wealth, African health. And working with your wonderful wife to try to preserve treasures in our community, seeded by the Honorable Coleman Alexander Young, which is another name we need to call.
Exactly.
We just thank God for this Malcolm X man. Well, and today we need to honor just Malcolm X. I want everybody watching and listening, just focus on our brother. Read his words. Study his life. Have family meetings about Malcolm X. This is his birthday. It's not just another day.
Exactly.
Reverend
May
Watson,
19th.
may I add something to what you just said? Not only read, but since young people now are plugged in technologically,
that's true.
Go on YouTube and other social media platforms and watch videos.
And we may have one. Let's see if that video's ready. Is it ready? Sean? Okay, let's go.
This is a surprise for you.
Home, when I was a Christian, I was a burglar.
When Malcolm became converted to the Nation of Islam,
I have no argument with Dr. Martin Luther King. He's doing the best he knows how. But what he's doing is out of style. It's out of date. And anybody who teaches Negroes today to turn the other cheek is actually committing a crime. I get excited when a white man becomes so concerned over Negroes defending themselves. All the white man has to do is stop brutalizing the Negro, and then he doesn't have to worry about the Negro doing whatever is necessary to defend himself. It's enough to get you excited.
I think he understood media politics before white elective politicians figured it out.
Sean, thank you for showing that video.
Wake up, Detroit.
This was a surprise, Miss Watson. That was shot at 11605 Linwood.
Group on Advanced Leadership.
Wow.
A few doors from your father's shop.
Exactly.
Interestingly enough, that's near the corner of Burlingame.
Yes.
That's north of it. Immediately south of it was what was then known as Muhammad's Mosque No. 1, which is now Masjid Wali Muhammad, which Malcolm's brother Wilford was at that time the minister of.
Yes.
But the reason that I brought that clip, you saw that was Milton Henry sitting there.
That's right.
That was
That's
Gaidi.
right.
But another reason I brought it is because you were one of the many great Detroiters who went to Central High School,
Yes, indeed.
right.
which is directly opposite that building.
Listen.
You
That's right.
and Wendell Anthony.
That's right.
Graduated in 1968.
We did.
That's right.
So
As a
you
matter
actually
of
could
fact,
have seen that. That's your side of town.
That's right. That's right there. Right there.
You know, I owe so much to the Nation of Islam. Not only did it introduce us to consciousnness and the Shrine of the Black Madonna and the Group on Advanced Leadership and so many other things were happening on Linwood, which is right off. I lived on Linwood in Buena Vista. And the brothers from the Nation used to just line up. There was a procession of them on Linwood. So walking to school, walking from school, you were really guarded by the Nation of Islam. I felt protected all the way home.
Exactly.
Did you ever stop by the luncheonette next to the mall?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
I
no
stop by regularly.
That's where the bean pie was
I
created.
was going to say.
Captain
regularly.
Joseph X. Gravitz.
Regularly.
Malcolm X's aide.
Not only
Created
did
it.
I have bean pie, I bought How to Eat to Live, read
That's
it
right.
on the way
That's right.
home,
Oliver Light's
got home
brother,
and started
Emmanuel.
preaching to my father. You know, I'm not eating any more pork. He used to cook a rib per child on the holiday. He thought I had lost my mind. Girl, are you trying to be one of them? Girl, I stopped eating pork at 14 and never touched it again. And, of course, my 4 children and grandchildren have been influenced by that diet.
Because of the Honorable
Because of
Elijah
that book. I say it every time they invite me to speak. I say I owe my diet.
That was just.
So I owe mine too.
That's right. And me too. It's so powerful. And it indicated, here I was right there at Dad's barber. I remember my brothers would always come to my dad's shop. Never said it. They always called him. His name was Johnson, R.C. Johnson. And I was named after him, Ray Clifford. He's from Georgia. I said, man, it'd been kind of cool to be Ray Charles Johnson. But, and always in school, they never could understand those middle class teachers that my father's name was R.C.,
Yes.
the initials.
Yes.
And which was a common practice in
Oh,
the
sure.
South, particularly with a lot of black men and all that. And I used to stutter as a kid, and they had convinced me that I did not have the wherewithal and IQ to learn.
Come on, somebody.
And
Dr.
I-
Ray Johnson.
Yeah, and I remember I would be in there, and every time I had a new teacher, you had to fill out these forms before technology and put your dad's full name, your mom's full name.
Yeah.
And invariably, they'd call me up, and I'd be embarrassed
What's
to
your
come
daddy's
up.
full name?
Yeah, what's your daddy's full name? I said,
That's it.
that's name. And they said, that's not his name. Those are his initials. Now, a couple things. You're the new teacher. You've already destroyed the relationship and trust that we would have going
That's right.
forward. You embarrassed me in front of my classmates
That's
and
right.
friends. You saying my daddy ain't got a name.
Come
and
on
I would
now.
always have to go home. My mother would send me a note that this is Ira C. Johnson. Well, in the barbershop one day, I'd gone south. And we had this legendary, we had a lot of relatives, all these great uncles. But I heard about R.B. And I said, I just got to meet this man. They said, he's like 6'7" and a half, and he's like, boy, he's powerful. And I get there, and I meet him. And as he was driving around, he would take me to different places. In the South in those days, it was always like, hey, they got time for you. This right here is my young nephew from Detroit, and everybody to go around, we talk
That's
and have
right. They
conversation.
feed you, too.
And they feed you.
That's your now.
But I kept on hearing them say, Robert Bradley. And after we went through the whole day, and I went home with him and the family, and I was talking, I said, R.P., why do they keep calling you Robert Bradley? I didn't know. He said, well, son, you see, in the big war, World War II, see, the man didn't play that with those initials. They would give you a name for your initials.
Wow.
A name? I came back. And as I was thinking about in those days about Malcolm X and, identifying and naming who you are and taking a look at that whole problem. And I remember talking to my father. I came back and said, hey, Dad, after giving a report of R.B. and all and everybody, I said, Dad, they call him Robert Bradley. But he said, though, Dad, when you were in the war, my dad was over in Italy and led an organization against what they were doing to the black soldiers there. He narrowly escaped getting a dishonorable discharge. But I said, but he said that they assigned a name to you too. And he looked at me and I said, so then why didn't you tell me? He said, because it wasn't my name.
Come on now.
He said, just as they're teaching the mosque, that was not my name.
What you say?
He said, son, if someone can name you, they claim you and they own you. And I'll never, my dad, God bless his memory now, but I remember he said something I never forgot. He said, it's not what they call you.
That's it.
But it's what you answer to.
That's it. Go ahead.
And that connected all of the teachings of Elijah Muhammad and coming to my dad's shop and all of those brothers. And as you mentioned, like, man, my good brother who was over the fruits of Islam and they were out, their presence.
Yeah.
And there's always this cosmic power when you stand on ground, stand on faith, and when you speak, your faith is the voice of authority.
You better say
those men didn't even have to say anything.
Now, you know who had it in his bones? Robert Williams.
Exactly.
The great Robert Williams.
Exactly.
Now, Robert Williams, that old low-down J. Edgar Hoover had him on the 10 most wanted list of the FBI
Right.
simply because he stood up and said his family was not going to be assassinated by the murderous Klan in the Carolinas. No.
Exactly.
No, he who fought for this country in the Marines and who understood the power of weapons and took a stand against the Klan as they were coming to attack him and others. What they did was dig trenches.
Yes.
And armed themselves, and they ran the Klan back home. That's what they did. That was Robert Williams with his bad stuff. Now, if there was anybody that Malcolm X looked up to, it was Robert Williams, who was bad. As they were coming to get him, found his way through the woods, made his way out of this country to Cuba, where he did Radio Free Dixie, broadcast. He understood the power of the media. Where he stood and negotiated his way to Africa and then ultimately to China. And do you know, it was Robert Williams, who was still on that most wanted list, who helped the United States under Nixon negotiate normalizing ties with China. And now the United States is borrowing more money from China than anybody else, but it was Robert Williams.
That's right.
Who negotiated his way back to America, where he was able to die a natural death in America, and being an adjunct professor at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor.
Ms. Watson, in the era before all this fancy technology that's used to communicate, Robert Williams published a small newsletter called The Crusader.
That's right.
He was able to smuggle that from Cuba and later so-called communist China through Canada, throughout the United States.
And he wrote Negroes with Guns.
The late, great General Baker Jr.
That's right.
And Charles Simmons told me that they were able to monitor Radio Free Dixie broadcasts from Cuba here in Detroit.
That's right.
There were certain times that you could be able to get it.
Yes.
So for young people nowadays who think they're hot stuff with all the technology,
come on now.
It's not what you have access to, but what's the content behind
That's it. That's it.
Exactly.
And this is what another reason I'm not only glad that you're doing this show, but that you're broadening the focus, not just Malcolm X, but also the other warriors who were with it. We lived in an era of giants.
That's it.
And it is said in Africa
Can
that
you
an
imagine?
ancestor has not died so long as their name.
That's right.
You better say it.
And the fact that you were mentioning these names, and let's not forget Mother Irma Henderson.
Mother Irma Henderson.
And
Queen
Rosa
Mother.
Parks.
Mother Rosa Parks. Queen Mother.
Giants.
Come on now. No one like
And
that.
if we're looking for direction,
Now,
and
Mother
even
Henderson
program,
used to talk
mention
about
these names.
how she would get to work cooking an entire brisket, and she didn't eat meat in her later days, but when she was young, and the great Reverend Charles Hill of Hartford Baptist Church would host Paul Robeson when Paul Robeson had become persona non grata in this racist United States. He was always welcome in Detroit.
That's right.
And when Reverend Hill would bring him here, the Honorable Coleman Alexander Young was one of his bodyguards.
Yes.
Dave Moore, co-founder of UAW, who worked closely with General Baker, was another bodyguard. And Mother Henderson would cook for him. She said Paul Robeson would lay in her bed waiting for her to finish the briskets take 5 hours. If you cook it right, 300 degrees, 5 hours. And she had Art Carter, her godson, sitting at his feet, listening to him talk, and the neighborhood youngsters. And she said her house felt like royalty when Paul Robeson was in the house.
Yeah. You know, when I think about, certainly with all of those legends and giants, at the core of all that was always education.
That's right.
It was always getting to know who you are, which is why we know that.
And unity.
They
loved,
absolutely.
She and Mother Henderson and Coleman Young loved Joe Louis so.
Yes.
But when he won
yes.
that legendary,
Oh.
they said the whole city turned out on the streets.
Yes.
They danced, they sang, they cried. His victory was their victory.
Exactly.
We need to get back to that.
Exactly.
When our people win, we all win.
We all win. That sense of collective, you know, we own all of that.
Unity.
You know, that level of unity is amazing. When I think in terms of what Paul Robeson, when I found the school, I kept thinking about so who would I name the school
Come
after?
on now. Come on, somebody.
And I knew that Clifford already had chosen Malcolm X. I said, well, I'll do Paul Robeson.
Great
And now,
Dr. Clifford Watson.
That's right. And now 25 years later, it's been merged to Paul Robeson, Malcolm
Now,
X.
look at God. Look at God. You know,
I did that.
Mother Betty Shabazz in her last public address spoke to the 8th grade graduating class of the Malcolm X.
Yeah.
Malcolm X's widow.
Yes, Dr. Betty Shabazz, and she told those children under the tutelage of Dr. Clifford Watson and one of my daughters, Nefertari.
Yes.
was a master teacher in African Center. that don't just be African-centered. You get these children to the motherland.
Exactly.
So after the fateful fire that ultimately took her life later that year, we raised money, led by Dr. Clifford Watson and others, and Kwame Kenyatta, and so many other grassroots folks, to send a plane load of those Malcolm X students.
That's right.
To Ghana, West Africa, so they could celebrate Kwanzaa in the motherland.
In the motherland.
Wow, Ghana,
you know what?
which Malcolm X called the fountainhead.
Come on, somebody.
That's right. Back in '93, I took 100 students and family members back to Dakar, Senegal, so they can certainly understand that the whole issue of. And I remember, I think who was on the plane with me. I think even Colson was on that plane. Or Bernard Pryor. I remember getting off the plane, and then watching one of my 10-year-olds kiss the ground.
On their own initiative.
On his own initiative.
Look at God.
It brought me to tears.
Woo! Hallelujah.
And one of the parents whispered in my ears, excuse me, and she said, "Do you see how you're impacting this young son?"
Look at God.
I literally had the tears.
Look at God.
That young son. And the rest of the experience was absolutely amazing. It came back changed. I ran into one of these young men right now who was doing stuff in Botswana and international things and law. And he said, "Doc, I lived over there on George and Helen in a little enclave on." He said, "I had not been past Van Dyke Street.
My Lord.
And here he took me across the water."
Praise God.
And one of the things that Malcolm and all the other leaders recognized, that this is a global mission.
That's right.
And being united that way.
And we are global people.
And we are global people.
We are global, but that's why we are African people.
Exactly.
Who happen to be here. Our ancestors were not on a pilgrimage.
No.
They were kidnapped at gunpoint.
Exactly.
And the ships were built in Rhode Island, which built the industry in Rhode Island.
Exactly.
Our people need to know our history.
And there it is.
Our history did not begin with the period of enslavement.
No.
As a matter of fact, if the truth were told in the history books that our children are required to read, all Americans, everybody in this country, would have to acknowledge the great debt that is owed to people of African descent who built this country.
Exactly.
Who built this country.
Well, they certainly won't learn it in the school system, which has been looted by the state. I want to ask you a question following up on what Doc said about unity. If the city council, while you were on it, had held together, could this illegal, right-wing, racist takeover have been stopped?
Yes. Yes. They were tricked, seduced. Some got paid into defying the best interests of themselves and their own people. And threatened, of course some white guy called my office the day after my last election. And he was cussing so that the staff person who had picked up the call, I shouldn't have even been at work the day after that, but I was at work, workaholic. And I heard Charles Brown on my staff, Attorney Charles, I said, "You can't talk about it like that." His voice, I thought, "Give me the call." Like, it gave me his name. "How did you get back in there? You were the one we mainly wanted out. How did you get back in? What did you do? How did you get back in office? You were the reason we put all that money in." God works in mysterious ways. The Lord, if we would recognize who we are.
Yeah.
Somebody else's money should never define your route. Connect with the real source of our power. And when you get that direction, go forward and follow what the highest power has said. And then we will come back to reclaim ourselves. We ought to do that, especially on Malcolm X's birthday. I want to thank Paul Lee. I want to thank Ray Johnson. We thank you for being part of the birthday.
Yes.
And of course, we also feel, my Lord, a sense of loss, because he was larger than life, legendary, iconic, but he was flesh and blood, and had a period of time in Detroit. We ought to rise up, Detroit, because Malcolm X has been here and is here. Spirit never dies.
Never dies.
We honor Malcolm X on this day. Thank you for being a part of our wake up. Oh, my.
Yes.
My, my, my. Wake up, Detroit.
The views and opinions expressed on the following show are not necessarily the views and opinions of W33BY, its affiliates, management, or sponsors. WHPR TV is expanding its reach to 33 more cities on Comcast 9.